Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 72, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is late Friday night, May 24th, and I'm in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. And this is not, in fact, episode number 72. This, as it turns out, is episode 75. This is a lost episode, and we're giving it to you. It's not a Tuesday, but you're getting it anyway, and I hope you enjoy it. Some of the headlines are hilariously outdated, but also some of the stories that we cover, in light of everything that has happened since, turn out to be particularly prescient. I hope you enjoy. Well, we back, my people. We are back in the shed again for the first time in a couple months. It's been a couple months. We are out of hibernation. So much has happened in the world since we last got together. Let's give a quick rundown of events, shall we? The Trump trial has kicked into high gear. UConn men's basketball won their second consecutive national title. Kristi Noem got canceled. Israel launched attacks on Rafah and Gaza. Scotty Scheffler got arrested on his way into a golf tournament. Fani Willis won re-election in Georgia. College universities were overtaken by pro-Palestinian protesters. And the Garfield movie hit theaters. The Garfield movie. So, big news there. Hey, we've missed a lot. And I've missed interacting with you all. We have not been able to get out here and find the time to put some shows together lately. And the news that we're going to cover on tonight's show is a little bit different, because most of the stories are not stories that are happening right here today. They're things that have already happened, okay? But they're things that I've wanted to talk about with you, and I haven't had the opportunity. And it's my show. It's my shed. And I'm glad that you're here. Some interesting things happened in my world in the last 2 months since we have been together. We now have listeners in China. Our show, In the Shed with Wes Anderson, has never had a single listener from the nation of China. And during this 2-month hiatus, there was one day where we had a bunch of them. Just out of nowhere, just all of these listeners from China. And it made me a little bit nervous. Not because I don't love you, my Chinese brothers and sisters, but because episode 69 of the show was entitled, China Disappears Pfizer Executive. That was the first line on the title of the show, a story that we covered, a real news story, in fact. And then boom, all of a sudden, a huge influx of Chinese listeners. Shout out to you, my new Chinese fans. I also had an interesting experience at a local CVS here in Alabama. Let me start this story off by reminding you that I live in Alabama. And I had my daughter, and we were going to the pharmacy to pick up some medications for one of my children who was under the weather. And we're at the checkout line, about to get one of them 3.5-foot long receipts that they, for some reason, insist upon giving you at CVS. And this lady just walks right up. She's got this big overcoat on, and she walks right up to my daughter and I, and she goes, "Hey, little girl, look at this." And then she throws open her overcoat. And I thought I was going to have to fight somebody. I didn't know what was happening. Why is this person talking to my daughter? "Hey, little lady, look at this." And she throws open her jacket, and she's got a baby squirrel. Wasn't anything nefarious, wasn't anything inappropriate. She just had a baby squirrel, a live baby squirrel in the CVS up under her jacket. And it scared my daughter to death. We have not spoken to this lady. We had not been having conversations. She just walks up, "Hey, little girl, look at this," and throws her jacket open, and my daughter jumped back 3 feet behind me, which means that I'm raising her right. Have I mentioned that we live in Alabama? Baby squirrels aren't that cute, by the way. And that was definitely a terrifying experience for everyone. There's also a debate in my house right now between my wife and I. And this debate may wind up being a poll on our X account. You can follow us there at InTheShed4. But I was in my yard on the phone. And when I'm on the phone, I don't know what you do, but I pace. I'm a pacer. I'm Tyrese Halliburton when I'm on the phone, okay? I'm Reggie Miller when I'm on the phone. I'm in the yard. I'm walking back and forth. And by our house, there is some storage units. So I'm walking, and as I'm talking, I'm going through my yard. I'm in the area over there by the storage units and the gravel. And I'm walking, and I see something. And as I'm talking, I look at it, and I realize it's a dinosaur toy. Little Bronchiosaurus, I believe. One of them men with the long necks. Daddy long neck. And so I bent down and picked it up out of the dirt. It was quite filthy. And I walk into the house when I get off the phone. And I run it under some hot water. And I drop it in a cup with some of that dish detergent spray. And after about 20 minutes, my wife comes in the kitchen, and she's staring at this thing. And she says, "Wes, what is that?" And I said, "It's a dinosaur toy." And she says, "I can see that. Where did it come from, and why is it sitting in a cup of soapy water?" And I said, "Well, when I was out there on the phone, I saw it in the dirt. And I picked it up and brought it home." And she said, "Why?" I said, "I figured our son could enjoy it once I cleaned it up." And she said, "He has 3,000 dinosaurs already. Why would you bend down and pick up this dirty dinosaur toy out of the dirt?" And I was so confused. I was genuinely confused, my babies. And my response to her was, are you telling me that if you're walking and you see a dinosaur toy on the ground, that you're not going to stop and pick up that toy? And without batting an eye, without taking a moment to pause and consider, she says, No, I wouldn't pick it up. And I told her I didn't believe her. How do you not pick up a dinosaur toy when you see it on the ground? I have a hard time believing anybody who tells me that they would not pick it up. It's sitting right there. It's a toy. It's a dinosaur. We're from the Land Before Time generation. There was like 15 of them movies, okay? And you're telling me you're not going to bend down and pick up the toy? I don't believe her. I trust my wife. I love my wife. I couldn't find a better life partner in 3,000 lifetimes, okay? But I have a hard time believing she would not pick up that toy. What about you? Would you pick up a dinosaur toy if you found it on the ground? Yeah, it was a little dirty. No big deal. So what? I asked her, I said, do you want me to boil it? Would that make you feel better? And she said, I want you to throw it away. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Look at our X account to see this poll when I throw it up and settle this debate. Would you pick up a dinosaur toy if you found it on the ground? I would. In fact, I did. All right, enough of that. Let's get to some comments and corrections from our last episode. Our humble little show is being listened to across the globe, 68 countries in total and counting. We are, of course, being listened to all over this great country of ours, all 50 states, but we're still continuing to grow in popularity worldwide, little by little. This show is like the little engine that might be able to eventually. The United States now makes up a record high 51% of our listening audience, the biggest share of our listening audience ever, followed by India at 37%, with France, China, Australia, Mexico, Germany, and Malaysia rounding out our top 10. And China's at number 6, y'all. Number 6. I want to give a special shout out to our 83 new listeners in China this week. Ni hao, China. We are currently averaging more listeners per episode than ever before. Still true thanks to you. We're still adding followers over on X, where finally we have surpassed 10,000 and counting. And I remind you that makes me officially a micro-influencer now. You can find us there at In the Shed 4. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at In the Shed with Wes Anderson 6670. We're up to a massive 31 subscribers over there now. Please support the show by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you leave us a review this week, we'll give you a shout out on our next episode. Share the show with a friend. Word of mouth is still how we grow. And by joining our membership club at patreon.com/intheshed4. You can donate as little as $1 or subscribe for exclusive content for as little as $4 a month. If you keep supporting the show, I'll keep bringing you the news. If you subscribe, like, share, and review, we'll keep growing this thing together. I've gotten 3 or 4 emails over the last couple months from listeners saying that I went to subscribe to the Patreon, but there was only one post. And I don't want to subscribe if there's not going to be any content. Well, here's the thing. I'm waiting for some subscribers so that I can start posting some content. At one point in the show, we used to have a newsletter, a pretty ballin' newsletter that we would send out once a week. It got up to about 31 subscribers at $3 a month. And when I moved it over to Patreon, I haven't started that newsletter again because I'm waiting on some of those subscribers. So go over to Patreon if you are a supporter or fan of the show, and we'll get that newsletter going again. We've got a great show for you tonight, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Damien from Madison, Wisconsin, go Badgers, who writes, Wes, I've been listening to your show for a while now. I like the free-flowing format, how you move from article to article. It reminds me a lot of Pat Bet David. Have you heard of him? Yeah, I've heard of Pat Bet David. His show is about 3 million times the size of ours. Damien, I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if PBD was doing his podcast before we were. I'm not sure. But he is one of the few shows that I'm aware of that has anything similar to what we do here, with the only difference being we read the entire article. He usually reads a good portion of it and gives you an idea of what it says. We just like to do it that way. We like to read the whole article, lay out the news for you, let you make your own conclusions. Thank you for listening to the show and for writing in, Damien. Our next email comes from Kelly from Atlanta, who says, did you cancel the show? Was just starting to get good. No, Kelly. We didn't cancel the show. This show is a hobby. I realize that I am, in fact, a journalist, but hey, I don't always have time to get out here every single week and do a show. That is the goal, but we don't always hit our goal. We aim for weekly. Sometimes we have to take a small hiatus, but we're back. The show is not canceled, and I'm glad that you feel like it's just starting to get good. I guess that's kind of, sort of, almost a compliment. I hope it gets better. I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you for listening, and thank you for writing into the show, Kelly. And finally, Michael from Birmingham, Alabama, up here in my part of the world, writes, Wes, you call yourself a journalist, and yet I haven't heard one word about Israel attacking Rafah or Donald Trump being on trial. Well, hey, Michael, there's a very good reason for that. Those things happened when we weren't on air. We weren't on air, Michael. We haven't done the show since those things happened. And if you hear this episode, Michael, you've already heard mention of it in what's happened since our last episode, and you may hear some headlines regarding those things as well. And for the record, I don't call myself a journalist. I just point out that you, the good people on the internet, have labeled me a journalist. Thank you for listening to the show. My good friend Michael from Birmingham. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. Speaker Johnson to invite Netanyahu to Capitol Hill, writes the American Conservative. Elon Musk predicts AI will replace all human jobs and lead to universal high income, reports Fox Business. Chinese state media issues warning to key U.S. partners, says Newsweek. From ProPublica, Kristi Noem said she's proud to support babies, moms, and families. Her record shows otherwise, critics say. And finally, there's literally nothing Trump can say that will stop Republicans from voting for him, and that is according to The New Yorker. Our first story in the world of politics, U.S. military to withdraw troops from Niger. The status of a $110 million airbase in the desert remains unclear as the West African country deepens its ties with Russia. More than 1,000 American military personnel will leave Niger in the coming months, Biden administration officials said on Friday, upending U.S. counterterrorism and security policy in the tumultuous Sahel region of Africa. In the second of two meetings this week in Washington, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt M. Campbell told Niger's Prime Minister Ali Lamine Zain that the United States disagreed with the country's turn toward Russia for security and Iran for a possible deal on its uranium reserves and the failure of Niger's military government to map out a path to return to democracy, according to a senior State Department official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss diplomatic talks. The decision was not a particular surprise. Niger said last month that it was revoking its military cooperation deal with the United States following a highly contentious set of meetings in Niger's capital, Niamey, with a high-level American diplomatic and military delegation. The move was in keeping with a recent pattern by countries in the Sahel region, an arid area south of the Sahara, of breaking ties with Western countries. Increasingly, they are partnering with Russia instead. American diplomats have sought in the past several weeks to salvage a revamped military cooperation deal with Niger's military government, U.S. officials said, but in the end they failed to strike a compromise. The talks collapsed amid a growing wave of ill feelings toward the U.S. presence in Niger. Thousands of protesters in the capital last Saturday called for the withdrawal of American armed forces personnel only days after Russia delivered its own set of military equipment and instructors to the country's military. Niger's rejection of military ties with the United States follows the withdrawal of troops from France, the former colonial power that for the past decade has led foreign counterterrorism efforts against jihadist groups in West Africa, but which has lately been perceived as a pariah in the region. American officials said on Friday that discussions with Niger to plan out an orderly and responsible withdrawal of forces would begin in the coming days, and that the process would take months to complete. Many of the Americans posted to Niger are stationed at U.S. Air Base 201, a 6-year-old $110 million installation in the country's desert north. But since the military coup that ousted President Mohamed Bazoum and installed the junta last July, the troops there have been inactive, with most of their MQ-9 Reaper drones grounded, except for those flying surveillance missions to protect the troops. It's unclear what access, if any, the United States will have to the base in the future, and whether Russian advisors and perhaps even Russian air forces will move in if Niger's relations with the Kremlin deepen. Because of the coup, the United States had to suspend security operations and development aid to Niger. Mr. Bazoum is still under arrest 8 months after he was ousted. Nevertheless, the United States had wanted to maintain its partnership with the country. But the sudden arrival of 100 Russian instructors in an air defense system in Niger this past week made the chances of cooperation in the short term even more unlikely. According to Russia's state-owned news outlet, RIA Novosti, the Russian personnel are part of Africa Corps, the new parliamentary structure intended to take the place of the Wagner Group, the military company whose mercenaries and operations spread in Africa under the leadership of Yevgeny V. Prigozhin, who was killed in a plane crash last year. The demonstrators in Niamey on Saturday waved Russian flags as well as those of Burkina Faso and Mali, two neighboring countries where military-led governments have also called in Russian assistance to help fight insurgents affiliated with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. American officials say they've tried for months to prevent a formal rupture in relations with Niger's junta. The new U.S. ambassador to Niger, Kathleen Fitzgibbon, one of Washington's top Africa specialists, has held regular discussions with the junta since officially taking office at the beginning of the year. In a trip to Niger in December, Molly Fee, an assistant secretary of state for African affairs, said the United States intended to resume security and development cooperation with Niger, even as she called for a swift transition to civilian rule and the release of Mr. Bazoum. But the Pentagon has been planning for the worst-case contingencies if the talks have failed. The Defense Department has been discussing establishing new drone bases with several coastal West African countries as backups to the base in Niger, which is now landlocked. Talks are still in the early stages, military officials say, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss operational matters. Current and former security and diplomatic officials said Niger's strategically significant location and willingness to partner with Washington would be difficult to replace. J. Peter Pham, a former special U.S. envoy to the Sahel, said in an email, "While the ordinary people of Niger will bear the brunt of the consequences of an American military withdrawal and the subsequent loss of political and diplomatic attention, the United States and its allies also lose, at least in the short term, a strategic military asset that will be very difficult to replace." So, you may be wondering why in the world, with all that's happening, when you haven't had a show for 2 months, are you leading off with a story about a U.S. airbase in Niger? Well, let me return your question with a question, my babies. Have you heard this reported on CNN, on Fox News, on News Nation, on MSNBC? Have you read this in the newspaper? Have you seen it online? Have you seen it discussed on social media? Because I'm guessing the answer for most of you is probably no. We hear a lot about the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. We hear a lot about the war between Russia and the Ukraine. We hear very little about what's going on in places like Myanmar or Yemen or all over Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, and here in Niger. The president of Niger was someone that the U.S. government really wanted to invest in. They sent all kinds of aid and help and money this man's way. They saw him as an elected official that could really give us a strategic foothold in the region. And then his own military ousted him. And now in a region where Al-Qaeda is running rampant, where national leaders are being deposed by their own military, you have a situation where the former president Bazoum is being held in his house as a prisoner, no AC in the home, not allowed to leave, and the U.S. is being told to get out, to leave, to abandon our military base in the desert that we have spent 6 years and $110 million building. And as we're being protested in the streets, Russian troops are showing up. And this highlights some real foreign policy issues and missteps with our country. Because we try to do this all over the world, and we typically invest in the wrong places at the wrong times. Nothing against the nation of Niger. I understand what the U.S. was trying to do there, but hey, we spent $110 million establishing our most expensive foreign air base, and we're just going to have to walk away from it. And not only walk away from it, but walk away from it in a territory where Al-Qaeda is on the move and their influence is growing. And not only just walk away from it, and not only in an area where Al-Qaeda is running rampant, but Russia is coming in behind us. I don't see how you mark that as anything other than an all-around failure for the U.S. When the president of Niger was ousted by his military, France and the U.S. got together and talked about it. France wanted to launch some kind of rescue mission to free him. The U.S. did not. And now, who wins other than Russia and maybe Al-Qaeda? And this is happening for us. This is what happens when you spread yourself too thin on the world stage. This has happened when you make missteps. We thought that we would isolate Russia and make them a pariah on the world stage. And all that's happening all over Africa and other parts of the world is that China and Russia are moving in and taking position and building relationships where we're being told to get out. And it's alarming. It's a little bit alarming. I feel bad for their former president who's locked in his house with no AC in the desert. I hope that he is safe and his family is safe. But I'm tired of us spending hundreds of millions of dollars elsewhere. All these military contracts. The military-industrial complex always has something to build and always gets paid. The taxpayers get the bill, and in the end, we're just told to leave. I'm guessing you haven't seen it on the news. I'm guessing you haven't heard that there are people in the streets protesting our presence. It didn't work out for us. $110 million air base. It didn't work out for us. I hope that Al-Qaeda doesn't take control from the military there in Niger. Vladimir Putin and his troops are probably going to be enjoying a very nice air base paid for by you. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. We like to highlight the news here on In the Shed with Wes that doesn't get highlighted enough elsewhere. And I thought that this story mattered from an international perspective, from the perspective of our military, from the perspective of our foreign policy and diplomacy. And I wanted you to know about it. Our next story in the world of politics: San Francisco appoints first non-citizen to serve on election commission. Yeah, we going to the silly town USA, San Francisco. The newest member of the San Francisco Election Commission, a 7-member civilian body that oversees and creates policy for the city's Department of Elections, isn't legally allowed to vote. What are we doing? Kelly Wong, an immigration rights advocate, is believed to be the first non-citizen appointed to the commission. Imagine that. At a swearing-in ceremony administered by Board of Supervisors President Aaron Peskin on Wednesday at San Francisco City Hall, dozens of people gathered to commemorate the occasion. Wong said she hopes her appointment is a beacon of hope for other immigrants living in the city. There are always voices inside my head like, you can't do it. You're not competent. You're an immigrant. This is not your country. That's not true, said Wong, who immigrated to the U.S. in 2019 from Hong Kong to pursue graduate studies. If I can do it, you can do it. Wong's appointment is the result of a 2020 voter-approved measure that removed the citizenship requirement to serve on San Francisco boards, commissions, and advisory bodies. Each of the commission's 7 members is appointed by a different city official, such as the mayor, city attorney, or district attorney. The Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to appoint Wong. I'm very impressed by her commitment to enfranchising people who rarely vote, to educating people about the voting process, and to bring in non-citizens and get them the tools they need to become citizens, Peskin said. Drawing on her lived experience, Wong said she wants to increase engagement among the city's immigrant and non-English speaking communities. Anyone who's delved into San Francisco's ballot knows it can be just as confusing for native English speakers to decipher the myriad propositions, their arguments, in the city's ranked choice voting system. Even though I'm fluent in English, I still encounter challenges in navigating a new system, let alone participating in political conversation and activities, Wong said in an interview with KQED before Wednesday's swearing-in ceremony. One of Wong's priorities is to ensure that voter materials are translated in a way that people can understand. She pointed out, for example, that there isn't an equivalent term for the word reparations in Cantonese or Mandarin. I've seen how language and cultural barriers prevent immigrants with limited English proficiency from fully exercising their right to vote, Wong said. Is there a way to do voter outreach that's not about translation, but can touch on political education while maintaining neutrality and impartiality in elections? Since 2022, Wong has done this kind of work as an immigrant rights advocate at Chinese for Affirmative Action, a civil rights group in San Francisco that focuses on the city's Chinese community. Since commissioners are unpaid, Wong will continue her work as an advocate, helping people like Christina Yang, who immigrated here from China 13 years ago. Whenever I experience a language barrier or difficulties around access, I can come to Kelly for help, Yang said in Cantonese. Non-citizens aren't totally barred from voting in San Francisco. In 2016, after multiple attempts in previous years to pass a similar measure, voters approved Proposition N, which allowed San Francisco non-citizens to vote in school board elections if they had a child who went to school in the district. In 2022, a state superior court judge struck down the law in a case brought by the United States Justice Foundation, a conservative nonprofit. The California Court of Appeal ultimately reversed the ruling. I think we have to go beyond, are we going to do the bare minimum, to how we can get everyone fully involved, said Vincent Pan, co-executive director of Chinese for Affirmative Action. He hopes that Wong's appointment reasserts the commitment of recent measures to get more San Franciscans civically involved. I'm hoping there will be a day where it won't be as newsworthy that you have someone who's an immigrant and a non-citizen involved in helping make the city run better, especially in a city where such a large percentage of the community is immigrants, Pan said. So, I'm actually going to surprise you here, my tools, because I'm going to start off with the positive that there is present in this story, because there are some things here that we can applaud and celebrate. On the one hand, I think it is quite commendable that Miss Wong would advocate so much for civic engagement in her new country. I love that she is working hard to make sure that those who are immigrants to our nation have the ability to exercise their right to vote. And I applaud her for caring more about elections than 2/3 of our nation does. However, San Francisco, what are you doing? San Francisco is not a serious place. These are not serious people who are in charge of the city of San Francisco. A beautiful city, but a city whose leaders are hilarious. Do you realize there is an app that you can download that exists just to show where human feces are on the streets of San Francisco so that it can be avoided? Because the homeless epidemic has run amok in their city. We're talking about a city that we have covered on this show before that spent over $1 million to try and install a toilet in a public park and failed miserably. A city that has recently decided to offer homeless people who are alcoholics a shot of vodka at the taxpayer's expense because, hey, why not? And now they are putting someone on the Commission of Elections who seems to be a very bright and passionate and capable person. This is nothing against Miss Wong. Kudos to her. But who doesn't even have the right to vote in this country. Someone who is not yet even a citizen. What are we doing? And this show is for everybody. We have listeners all over the country, some who are very liberal and left-leaning, some who are very conservative. And I have been upfront with you that I am politically homeless. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I believe that we need both the left wing and the right wing of this beautiful bald eagle in order for it to soar. But hey, this lady is not even a citizen. This lady does not even possess the right to vote herself. And we're putting her on the commission over elections. Does that make sense to you? Does that seem like a good idea? Cue the quote from George Costanza. Should I have not done that? Was that wrong? I don't know what to say about the city of San Francisco. They don't seem to have a plan. I'm all for immigration. I'm all for helping people have the tools to immigrate to our country and to become citizens of a country where they have freedoms that they didn't have where they came from. But we're talking about elections. We're talking about freedoms that only extend to those who have citizenship. This seems absurd. It seems like an SNL skit is what it seems like. It seems like a parody of the left wing of our country. And yet in San Francisco it is reality. What do you think? Am I wrong? Do you think that this is actually a good idea and a positive thing? Or do you think that maybe we should leave elections up to those who are U.S. citizens? I would love to hear from you. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on X at intheshed4. Let us know what you think. Am I off base? Am I missing something? Or has San Francisco completely lost their ever-loving minds? Our next story in the world of politics: fired CNN host Brain Stelter running for school board in New Jersey as a Republican. When CNN's then CEO Chris Licht had taken a hatchet to the ranks of the network struggling to find an upward trajectory for ratings, reliable sources host Brain Stelter's ousting included his landing a gig as a Harvard Fellow. Following that stint in academic circles, the former on-air personality reportedly set his sights on impacting classrooms in the Garden State on a local school board as a Republican. One-time freelance reporter Shlomo Shore posted to X recently that according to the editor of the New Jersey Globe, David Wildstein, Stelter was seeking an elected position in Hunterdon County. Former CNN reporter Brain Stelter is seeking a seat on the Readington Township, New Jersey School Board, Wildstein is reporting. The former host of Reliable Sources is one of 6 candidates interviewing to fill a vacant seat caused by the resignation of Christina Napoli, wrote Shore. Reports indicated that the former host had been registered as a Republican since 2022, prompting some to suspect the affiliation was either a ruse or a result of a crowded field of Democratic Party contenders looking to fill the same spot. The reasoning behind the alleged run didn't need to be known for social media users to find the premise hilarious. "You can't make this stuff up," one poster wrote. "This is hilarious. Probably too many Dems running," said another. "They do know he's Brain Stelter, right?" someone on Twitter said. "Mr. Potato Head looking for another gig?" another wrote. "At least it's not Jeffrey Toobin," one person online said. Stelter had boasted ahead of his 2022 CNN departure that his program was used in lesson plans around the world. "It's a part of journalism school curriculum. Teachers use segments from this show all the time in classrooms, lessons, guiding and teaching the next generation." Meanwhile, he wasn't alone in being a former CNN personality supposedly seeking a new position in elected office, as Axios had reported that departed anchor John Avlon had officially launched his bid for Congress in New York's 1st congressional district this week. "Right now, our democracy's in danger," the Democratic primary contender said in a launch video that wasted no time picking up on party narrative. Avalon had only recently left the network, and his announcement was met with a statement from National Republican Congressional Committee spokeswoman Savannah Vire that read, "We look forward to litigating this smug liberal hack's past." As VR anticipated covering Avalon's past, others were reminded of Stelter's own experiences around students, particularly one college student who called him out during a conference on disinformation and the erosion of democracy. "You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them," said then freshman Christopher Phillips in spring 2022. He went on to add, "With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular, seem to magically all go in one direction," noted Phillips. "Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?" Infamously, Stelter replied, "Too bad, time for lunch," before claiming that he would talk to the young man in detail about the issue after the conference. So, Brain Stelter wants to be on the school board. Brain Stelter wants to shape young minds. I would rather have Kim Kardashian on the school board, okay? I would rather have Dennis Rodman on the school board, okay? I would rather have Wes Anderson on the school board, okay? And something that we don't really do on this show very often is disparage individual human beings, because everybody is made in the image of God and has value, including Brain Stelter. But hey, Brain Stelter was the only person on TV more smug than Shamu the whale. Brain Stelter is no journalist. Brain Stelter is if a knot on a log was personified and given a TV show. Brain Stelter is to journalism what Keeping Up with the Kardashians is to documentaries. Brain Stelter is to journalism what reality TV is to reality. Brain Stelter is what happens if Humpty Dumpty put on a suit and tie and read the news. Brain Stelter is as trustworthy as gas station sushi. Brain Stelter is as talented as he is not handsome. Brain Stelter is less popular than a colonoscopy. Brain Stelter is a potato. And these are not opinions. These are not metaphors. These are not similes. These are Brian Gerard Stelter. Okay. The fact that this man wants to be on the school board is hilarious. And it's newsworthy simply because it is on its face ridiculous. This man has no qualifications. This man is not somebody you want melding young minds, directing curriculum, making decisions for K through 12 schools at a local level. If Brain Stelter is in the news, chances are we will cover it here on In the Shed with Wes Anderson, because we do journalism from a shed in my backyard of my home in Alabama in a way that Brain Stelter could only dream of doing. Brain Stelter is a potato. He just won't go away. He just won't go away. And for all I know that this election has already happened, this came to light during the period that we were not on air. But I couldn't resist covering this story because of its absurdity and ridiculousness. Rob Deerdeck. That Brain Stelter wants to be on the school board. Hey, New Jersey. Please don't. I was just giving San Francisco a hard time, but if you put Brain Stelter on your school board, you might just take the mantle as the most out of touch, silly town USA place in this great country of ours. Our last story in the world of politics this week, Joe Biden. Doctors have checked me over, and they're worried I look too young. Joe Biden has joked that doctors think he looks too young after completing his annual physical examination that described him as healthy, active, and robust. Again, I tell you, his physical examination that described him as healthy, active, and robust. The 81-year-old has been under mounting scrutiny over his health after a series of gaffes and a special counsel report that described him as an elderly man with a poor memory. Voters across the political spectrum have told pollsters that they're concerned about the mental and physical abilities of America's oldest ever president. Concern about his capacity to lead increased after he made a series of verbal fluffs and mixed up the presidents of Mexico and Egypt. On Wednesday, after delivering a speech in Washington about his plans to tackle crime, another major concern for voters, he was asked about his physical checkup conducted at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. "They think I look too young," he said, before adding that the exam showed nothing different than last year. The White House on Wednesday released a copy of a 6-page memo by Dr. Kevin O'Connor that said, "President Biden is a healthy, active, robust 81-year-old male who remains fit to successfully execute the duties of the presidency." It added that Mr. Biden feels well and that this year's physical identified no new concerns. The report also noted Mr. Biden was being treated for a number of ailments consistent with his age: sleep apnea, AFib with normal ventricular response, hyperlipidemia, gastroesophageal reflux, seasonal allergies, spinal arthritis, and sensory peripheral neuropathy of the feet. It said the president's gait remains stiff but has not worsened since last year. In his report last year, Mr. O'Connor declared Mr. Biden healthy and vigorous. It also noted that several age-related conditions the president was being treated for included foot pain, elevated cholesterol, and a minor heart arrhythmia. An annual medical checkup is part of the routine for all U.S. presidents, and the results are closely watched. After Donald Trump, who was 77, had his first physical in 2018, it was revealed he was suffering from a common form of heart disease. Mr. Biden's last physical showed the president had a lesion removed from his chest over the previous year, but the results otherwise largely matched the findings after his previous exam in November of 2021. That report said his occasional coughing was due to acid reflux, while a stiffened gait was the result of spinal arthritis, a previously broken foot, and neuropathy in his feet. A recent poll for NBC found that 76% of voters were concerned about Mr. Biden's age. He will be 86 if he wins re-election and completes a second term. A Quinnipiac University survey last week showed just 34% of Americans believe he has the mental fitness to serve a second term. The White House has hit back, pointing out Mr. Trump is just a few years younger and has displayed the same verbal and mental errors that concern voters about Mr. Biden. Yet polls show that voters see Mr. Trump as physically more robust than Mr. Biden. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, was asked whether Mr. Biden had undergone a cognitive test in the physical, and she said that he had not. "The president doesn't need a cognitive test. That is not my assessment. That is the assessment of the president's doctor. That is also the assessment of the neurologist who also made the assessment as well," she said. "I'll reiterate this. The president's doctor says, if you look at this president, who is also the commander-in-chief, he passes a cognitive test every day." So, what do we learn from this? We learned that Joe Biden's troll game might be as good as Donald Trump's. Robust. The man was described on an official report to the American people as robust. What about Joe Biden? Joseph Robinette Biden. What about this man seems robust to you? We're at a point where the press secretary, the doctors, everything is so partisan. that the information that we're receiving as the American public is not helpful. I remember when Ronnie Jackson was President Trump's doctor, he released some ridiculous statements as well about the fitness of a man that loves Big Macs, is overweight, and clearly not in terrific health either. But this is a concern. This is a real concern. If we're having to say he would be 86 years old if he's able to complete his next term, hey, there's a reason to have concern. That's a problem. And there's just not much the Biden camp can do to alleviate the concerns of the American people in this regard. We've been very slow on this show to cover Joe Biden in this way that conservative news shows often do. I am not a medical professional. I will not get into speculation on whether or not the man has dementia, but hey, we can look at his age. We can be honest. We can use common sense. My grandpa is the same age as Joseph Biden. My grandpa is a good man. I love my grandpa. I wouldn't put him in charge of babysitting my children or of running my finances, let alone the entire nation, because he's at a different stage of life. And we can be honest and say that all the demands of being the U.S. president, the stress that it causes, and what comes with the job is not something that someone that old, and in the state that he obviously is up to. That's not controversial. That's not conspiracy theory. It's just reality. And it's just common sense. And it's a shame that we are where we are as a country, that the two people that we have a chance to elect are so old. And if we want to go a different way, we can pick the guy who had a worm eat part of his brain. Those are the choices that we have. On the one hand, I think that Joe Biden's response here is funny. It's genuinely funny for him to be like, actually, they think I look too young. On the other hand, we might be in trouble. We might be in trouble. What do you think? Does Joe Biden's age concern you? Is it going to be something you consider when you step into the ballot box in November? I want to hear from you. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4 and let us know what you think. Is Joe Biden's age and mental state a concern for you? He says doctors are concerned that he looks too young. What do you say? That's all the news in the world of politics this week. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. Halliburton questionable for Game 3 with sore hammy. Cleveland Cavaliers fire J.B. Bickerstaff. Giants QB Daniel Jones ready for Week 1 start. Sean Payton says Bo Nix looking good in Denver quarterback race. Kansas and Duke to play in November in men's basketball. TNT to air college football games with sub-license with ESPN. And finally, my Atlanta Hawks get the number 1 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. Our first story in the world of sports, Iditarod issues time penalty to Seavey for not properly gutting moose that he killed on the trail. And we're going to the Iditarod in sports. We're in that time frame, my babies. This is a lost episode. We're in between professional and college sports seasons that we keep up with on the show. College football is coming soon. We have a college football preview episode on tap. The NFL and NBA have not started yet. We've already covered the NBA and NFL drafts. So you get the Iditarod, which is a dog race. We're talking Balto, my babies. that issues a time penalty to CV for, and I quote, not properly gutting moose that he killed on the trail. You're on pins and needles, I know. Let's dive in together. Iditarod officials on Wednesday imposed a 2-hour time penalty on musher Dallas CV for not properly gutting the moose he killed during the race earlier this week. And of course, it happens to a guy named Dallas. He would be named Dallas. And I imagine that even though he's in sub-freezing temperatures, he's probably on the back of that thing with them dogs in front of him in a sleeveless tank top with a Marlboro Red hanging out the side of his mouth. I digress. Race Marshal Warren Palfrey convened a 3-person panel of race officials to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of the moose, which became tangled up with CV and his dog team early Monday morning, about 12 hours after the day-long race officially started. One dog was injured in the encounter and flown back to Anchorage for care. If a musher kills a big game animal like a moose, caribou, or buffalo in defense of life or property during the race, rules require they gut the animal and report it to officials at the next checkpoint. I'm sorry. Rules require that if a musher kills a big game animal like a moose, caribou, or, checks notes, buffalo, in defense of life or property during the race, rules require they gut the animal and report it to officials at the next checkpoint. And this is a race, a sporting event, where you may come in contact with a wild buffalo. And that's wild. CV, a 5-time Iditarod champion, encountered the moose shortly after leaving the checkpoint in Squinta. He used a handgun to shoot and kill it at about 14 miles outside the village at 1:32 a.m. Monday. He might be from Alabama if he's using a handgun to kill a moose at 1:32 in the morning. According to the panel's findings, CV spent about 10 minutes at the kill site and then mushed his dog team about 11 miles before camping on a 3-hour layover. The team then departed at 5:55 a.m. for the next checkpoint, arriving in Finger Lake at 8 a.m. where CV reported the kill. It fell on my sled. It was sprawled out on the trail, CV told an Iditarod Insider television crew at the Finger Lake checkpoint, where he urged race officials to get the moose off the trail. I gutted it the best I could, but it was ugly, he said. A statement from the Iditarod said it had been determined that the animal was not sufficiently gutted by the musher. By definition, gutting includes taking out the intestines and other internal organs, officials said. The Iditarod can impose time penalties if a majority of the 3-person panel agrees a rule was broken and that a competitive advantage was gained. Penalties can range up to a maximum of 8 hours per infraction. Time penalties can be added to mandatory layovers each musher must take during the race or to a musher's final time after they reach Nome. Officials said the 2-hour penalty will be added to CV's mandatory 24-hour layover. The moose was retrieved and its meat salvaged and processed. Iditarod associates in Squinta were distributing the food. CV was leading the Iditarod on Wednesday, the first musher to leave the checkpoint in the mining ghost town of Ophir, about 350 miles into the race, after only staying for 15 minutes. Musher Jesse Holmes arrived in Ophir first, nearly 2 hours ahead of CV, but appeared to be resting. 4 other mushers were also in Ophir. The ceremonial start was held Saturday in Anchorage, with the competitive start beginning Sunday. This year's race has 38 mushers who will travel about 1,000 miles across 2 mountain ranges, the frozen Yukon River, and along the ice covering the Bering Sea. About 10 days after the start, they will come off the ice and onto Main Street in the old gold rush town of Nome for the last push to the finish line. So, it did not take Mr. CV 10 days to cross the finish line. He did it in 9 days and some change, even after colliding with a moose. And that's not something you see in the Olympics or the NBA or NFL. NFL might be closest, but hey, if you've ever seen a moose in person, They are big. We're talking about a large wild animal. And this race is incredible. This happened several months ago, but why not cover it on the show? We are bringing you yesterday's news tomorrow. CV collided with a moose. Shot it in the face with a handgun at 1:32 in the morning. Gutted it the best he could alone while tending to an injured dog that was flown to safety and treatment in Anchorage, and then continued on the race, in which he won. And now he will have possibly a statue built for him in Central Park in New York City, where there is a statue of my boy Balto. I've been there, and I've seen it. And I thought this was an incredible story, something you don't hear covered on sports shows very often, the Iditarod, where the winner receives something like $1,500 worth of gold nuggets, because why not? Why not? And your boy CV is a warrior. He is a real man. To be charging through the snow with a team of dogs, collide with a moose, get his dog some treatment, gut the moose the best he can on his own, receive a 2-hour time penalty, and still come out on top. He is the Wes Anderson of the Iditarod, okay? He's a 5-time champion. He might be the Michael Jordan of the Iditarod, okay? And we're covering the Iditarod, a dog race in Alaska, on this, our lost episode. Our next story in the world of sports, we go to college football. Kind of. Shilo Sanders' bankruptcy case reaches impasse over NIL information for Colorado star. The court-appointed trustee overseeing the bankruptcy estate of Colorado football player Shilo Sanders has asked to hire a special counsel in the case after reaching an impasse with Sanders' legal team over the turnover of business information related to his name, image, and likeness, according to court documents obtained by USA Today Sports. In his request filed Monday, the trustee, David Wadsworth, essentially asked the bankruptcy court to grant him an extra help in a bankruptcy proceeding that has gotten difficult. Federal bankruptcy judge Michael Romero then approved that request Tuesday as Sanders continues to try to free himself from more than $11 million in debt. Sanders, 24, is the son of Colorado coach Deion Sanders and is entering his final season of college football in Boulder after leading the team in tackles in 2023. He's had NIL deals to appear in commercials for Google and KFC, among other paid partnerships. He reported $193,713 in gross income for 2023 before he declared for bankruptcy last October. While the debtor Shilo Sanders has provided the trustee with certain NILs, the trustee needs to confirm that he's received all of the NILs and has full information of the use of revenue generated by the NILs, said the request filed by Wadsworth's attorney. This filing prompted response by Sanders' attorneys Wednesday, a day after the judge granted the trustee's request. They disputed the notion that there is an impasse. As trustee, Wadsworth's job is to take control of certain assets of the debtor, bringing these assets into bankruptcy estate, and sell or distribute these assets for the benefit of creditors, according to the federal court. Wadsworth previously was represented in the case by attorney Simon Rodriguez, a solo practitioner, but now wants more legal assistance in the case from Sherman & Howard, a bigger law firm in Denver with experience in asset recovery for bankruptcy cases. Rodriguez and Sanders' counsel have reached an impasse in their discussions concerning the turnover of NIL information, as well as other documents and information, said the filing obtained by USA Today Sports. Rodriguez does not have the support and depth of a larger firm such as Sherman & Howard, the trustee's filing stated. Accordingly, the trustee desires to retain Sherman & Howard for more complicated investigation, discovery, and litigation that will require greater bandwidth that can be provided by Rodriguez as a solo practitioner. The trustee's filing said an attorney with the firm could be brought in at discounted rates of $650 per hour to be assisted by another attorney working at $345 per hour. Judge Romero agreed, writing that Sherman & Howard's employment as special counsel is necessary and in the best interests of the estate. So, this is a unique and complicated and unfortunate an avoidable and interesting circumstance for a 23-year-old football star who is the son of a millionaire and who is going to be drafted in the NFL next season to find himself. This lawsuit is based on a dispute that goes all the way back to when Shilo Sanders was in high school, at a high school founded by his father, Coach Prime Sanders. And while there, Shilo Sanders had gotten into some trouble and was sent to in-school suspension, where he allegedly assaulted the school employee in charge of the in-school suspension who was trying to collect his cell phone, allegedly on orders from his father. And so this former school employee launched a civil lawsuit against Shilo Sanders, who again is the son of a millionaire Hall of Fame former NFL player who plays for a very popular, well-covered college football team and has all kinds of NIL deals. And when judgment was passed down against him, he has failed to pay or cooperate with those who are trying to collect the amount that he's supposed to pay. And eventually that led to him filing for bankruptcy. According to the attorneys representing the former school employee, the Sanders camp has not provided needed information about NIL deals, has made no payment of amounts agreed upon and structured by the court. And according to Mr. Sanders' attorneys, that is not the case. And this is bizarre. This was completely avoidable. This should not have happened. Upon looking into the story further, it seems that the impasse actually began when Shilo Sanders was ordered to be in court but never appeared. He said that the documentation was sent to a previous address and he was unaware. But hey, with all the resources and money that you have available to you, Coach Prime, how do you allow your child to miss a court date? How do you allow your child not to be completely in the know about what he's facing legally and have the best representation? How do you wind up in a situation where your kid files for bankruptcy? And this is the downside of NIL. These student athletes are now employees. They're earning money. They're liable. They're taxable. They're going to face problems. Maybe not exactly like this, but in a similar vein. I've been a defender and supporter of Coach Deion Sanders. I root for him. I root for the Colorado Buffaloes. And I have way before he got there. I'm not a bandwagon fan, okay? I spent a summer working in the beautiful state of Colorado, one of my favorite places I've ever been while in college. And I've rooted for the Buffaloes ever since. But this one doesn't make a lot of sense. This one doesn't seem like good coaching, or good parenting, or wise decision making. And it falls on Shilo Sanders, it falls on his fathers, it falls on their legal representation. This kid is the leading tackler from the team returning, about to enter a new season in which they hope to reach bowl eligibility, and they're saddled with this nonsense. It's not doing them any PR favors. It's a mess. It's a mess. Our last story in the world of sports this week, kind of. Russian chess player accused of attempting to poison rival before match. A Russian chess player is under investigation for allegedly attempting to poison another player ahead of a match last week. Security video shows the chess player Amina Abakarova, and I nailed that name, smearing what is alleged to be mercury on a chessboard later used by rival Umagnanat Osmanova. Probably didn't nail that one. Osmanova said she began feeling unwell soon later, complaining of nausea and dizziness, and security camera footage of the incident launched a police investigation into Abakarova, an article from chess.com, which is a real news site. The incident occurred during a tournament in Russia's Dagestan region on Friday, according to a statement posted on Telegram by Republic of Dagestan Sports Minister Sahid Sahavadad. No one else was harmed in the incident, and the tournament is scheduled to be completed Thursday, according to Zahavadad. The motives of such an experienced competitor as Amina Abakarova are incomprehensible, Sahavadad said. The action she took could have led to a most tragic outcome, threatening the lives of everyone who was present, including herself. Now she must answer for what she has done, by the law. The statement was linked to a post by Baza, a Telegram news channel, and included security video. I still feel bad. In the first minutes, I felt a lack of air and a taste of iron in my mouth. I had to spend about 5 hours on this board. I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't seen it earlier, Osmanova told Russia Today. She told the Russian newspaper Izvestia that she saw some tiny balls rolling around under her board and had no idea what it was until she realized it could have been mercury. And how did she know? She's a professional chess player. She's very intelligent, I'm sure. But how did she know? I don't think by sight. I would recognize mercury, but I'm not a scientist, okay? I'm just a man in his shed in the backyard of his home in Alabama, bringing you the news. I digress. That was when she alerted the authorities. Abakarova has reportedly said she wanted to knock her opponent out of the tournament, Russian media RTVI has reported. A police report quoted by Russian media said Abakarova's plan was to scare Osmanova, not harm her. Abakarova has now been detained by police and is facing up to 3 years in jail. And that's a Russian jail, according to the Mirror. Andrei Filatov, the president of the Russian Chess Federation, has also confirmed that Abakarova is temporarily suspended from Russian chess events pending an investigation into the incident. She is potentially facing a lifetime ban. As I guess she should. If she's guilty. As I guess she should. So, what did we learn in this story? My people, my tools, my babies. We learned that chess is much more serious in Russia than it is in America. Apparently. We learned that poisoning is much more prevalent in Russia than in America, apparently. And we learned that Russian chess players are much more aware of their surroundings and potential danger than any athlete in American sports, apparently. Because this lady is trying to win, I'm not going to try to pronounce her name again, but she's trying to win a chess championship, okay, in a match. It's not a game. It's a match. Much more serious. And she realizes during this 5-hour bout of intelligence that possibly she's being poisoned because she sees little tiny balls underneath the chessboard that she recognizes as mercury. Kudos to you. And now her opponent is going to face up to 3 years in a Russian prison, which sounds terrible. I enjoy winning. I do not enjoy losing. I play chess. But is it worth it? I don't know what the prize was, but is it worth it to possibly face 3 years in a Russian prison? I doubt it. That's all the news in the world of sports this week. Let's switch to this. The news in the world of the paranormal, where our first story takes us to public opinion. Yeah, we poll in America, my babies. We poll in maybe some of you, my tools. We poll in India. 4 in 10 people worldwide believe in witches. Around the world, belief in witches and witchcraft varied widely, but more than 9 in 10 people in Tunisia believed that people could use supernatural powers to do harm, while fewer than 1 in 10 people in Sweden did. Shout out to our listeners in Tunisia and Sweden. Worldwide, more than 4 in 10 people believe in witchcraft, a new study suggests. However, witchcraft, or the concept that people can use supernatural abilities to cause harm, is a belief that varies dramatically between nations. Just 9% of people in Sweden believe in witchcraft, while more than 90% of people in Tunisia believe some people hold malevolent powers, the study found. Belief in witchcraft may be as old as humanity itself. England's oldest cave art, for instance, may be witch marks, etched to ward off evil spirits, while the oldest written instance of the Hebrew name of God is found on a 3,200-year-old curse tablet meant to hex someone who broke a vow. The notion that humans can cause curses is present in most major world religions, including Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Hinduism, a 2021 Pew Research Center survey found. In the new study, researchers used a vast data set collected over 6 waves between 2008 and 2017 by the Pew Research Center. Overall, 140,000 people across 95 countries and 5 continents were asked a series of questions, and probably a few of them have listened to this show. Numerically, statistically, probably a few of them have listened to this show. I digress. Were asked a series of questions related to their belief in magic, such as, do you believe in the evil eye, or that certain people can cast curses or spells that cause bad things to happen to someone? One glaring limitation of the study, it did not survey anyone in India. And that's too bad. All you had to do was ask. All you had to do was send an email to the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would have hooked you up with some people in India. Maybe my boy Ramesh. I digress. Or China, which collectively are home to roughly 2.8 billion people. And we have 82 listeners in China. In one day, out of nowhere, onward. Based on the Pew sample, the researchers estimated that at least 1 billion people worldwide believe in witchcraft. Women, urban residents, and younger people were more likely to believe in such supernatural powers. However, having more education, more financial security, and living in a smaller household typically accompanied a reduced belief in witchcraft. Still, such beliefs were nonetheless found in people across the educational and socioeconomic spectrum. For instance, people with a very good economic situation were only 6% to 7% less likely to believe in witchcraft than people with very bad economic situations, according to the study, which was published November 23rd in the journal PLOS One. And unsurprisingly, those who were religious tended to be more likely to believe that some humans possess magical powers. Overall, religious and witchcraft beliefs, both centered on the key role of supernatural powers in life, go hand in hand, the researchers wrote in the study. People in countries with weak institutions, low levels of social trust, and greater emphasis on conformity and greater bias toward people in the in-group were also more likely to believe in witchcraft. That aligns with past anthropological work studying American indigenous people in the Navajo Nation, also known as the Dani, according to the new report. That prior research proposed that among Navajo people, belief in witchcraft served as a tool of social control that helps maintain order in a society when formal governance structures are absent or weak, the researchers wrote in the study. So, 4 out of 10 people worldwide believe that witches and witchcraft are, in fact, real. And I have no reason to doubt the information found in this study, okay? Because I, myself, your humble correspondent, not your horrible correspondent, but your humble correspondent, have met a witch, have had someone try to put a curse on me, and have faced off against a witch doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not joking. As former President Biden would say, I'm not joking, I'm not kidding, I'm being serious. No joke. No joke. I'm being serious. There was a period of time when my wonderful wife was pregnant with our firstborn, our daughter, and we had no insurance, okay? So once she could no longer work and it was at home with our daughter preparing to give birth, I had to take on a second job. And in addition to my full-time job, I also worked a job at Tom Thumb gas station, which is a part of the Kroger family. A wonderful family, in my experience. And I worked the midnight till 6 in the morning shift. For several months, maybe like 6 to 8 months, okay. And after I got trained and was working solo dolo from midnight to 6 a.m., it wasn't long before I had someone that I had to train. Just like Randy had done for me. Now, Randy didn't do a good job of training me. But he had trained me. He told me that you don't have to worry about taking the food off the roller grill because the heat probably killed the germs. I did not listen to Randy. But after a while, I had someone to train, and on her second night there, she told me, just so you know, I'm a witch. That's what she said. She said, just so you know, I am a witch. And she didn't have a broomstick or a hat or a black cat. Black cats are the best, by the way. But she said that she was a witch. She said that she practiced witchcraft. And I got to train her. Also, I once had someone try to cast a spell on me. This was when I was in college. I did an internship in the summers. I was working in a neighborhood that I loved in a major city that a lot of people would label a bad part of town. For the record, I enjoyed that part of town and the people and never felt unsafe, but a lot of people would label it a bad part of town. Myself and 3 other college students were going door to door in the neighborhood one day, and we knocked on a door and a lady opened it just a crack. And upon seeing us, she began to wave her hand side to side and mumble some language that was unintelligible. It wasn't a foreign language, it was something from somewhere else. And she had a look in her eye that I can only describe as foreboding. And I don't know what possessed me to do this or why I did this, but as soon as she began, I just looked at her and said, in the name of Jesus, shut up. I kid you not, that's what I said. In the name of Jesus, shut up. And this lady looked at me, her face turned pale, she stopped talking immediately, and she closed the door. And we left. Rapidly, we left. I think she was trying to cast a spell on me. Think what you will, you weren't there, I was. And now I'm in the shed in my backyard telling you about it. Also in college, faced off against a witch doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning outside of my bedroom window of my apartment. And I'll have to have my former roommate and my current best friend, the best man at my wedding, Rhett. I'll have to have him on to tell that story one day. But it was a legit witch doctor who was chanting outside of our bedroom window at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't doubt that 4 out of 10 people worldwide, 40% my babies, and that's quick math, believe that witches and witchcraft are real. Because hey, I do too. Think what you want, but I do too. What do you think? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4 and let me know what you think. Is witchcraft real? I'd love to hear from you. From public opinion, we go to quantum physics for our next story. Quantum physics may explain supernatural spiritual phenomena. Do phenomena. Do phenomena. Do da da da. Whenever I talk about quantum physics in this column, I usually get the same reaction from some readers saying it's heavy stuff, meaning hard to understand. No matter how much I try to simplify the concepts or theories involved, many still find them difficult to grasp. This is because it was discovered that the scientific experiments conducted by theoretical physicists result in the discovery of bizarre and illogical behavior of subatomic particles of matter in defiance of the classical laws of Newtonian physics. Are you with me so far? I'm not certain I'm with myself. I digress. For example, the old physics say that there's an objective world out there independent of the observer. Quantum physics found that a quantum object changes or is at least influenced by the observer, that it can be in two places at the same time, and that it can travel faster than light in defiance of Einstein's theory of relativity. That's probably one reason Einstein, to his dying day, could not accept the theories of quantum physics. He didn't say they were wrong, but they were simply inadequate to explain the nature of the physical universe. In a way, quantum mechanics or quantum physics is not really a very new science at all. It can be traced to a very simple experiment called the double slit experiment conducted by mathematician Thomas Young in 1801 to demonstrate that light and matter can display characteristics of both classically defined waves and particles. Moreover, it displays the fundamentally probabilistic nature of quantum mechanical phenomena. I already did the song. In simple language, that experiment eventually put into question the sacred laws of Newtonian physics. Probing the nature and characteristics of the smallest particle of matter, which quantum physics attempts to do, is like falling into the rabbit hole of Alice in Wonderland, where a cat can talk, playing cards come to life, and she can become big or small by biting a biscuit. In the magical world of Alice in Wonderland, the bizarre becomes ordinary, and the ordinary bizarre. What really fascinates me about quantum physics is how it seems to explain a number of paranormal, psychic, and spiritual phenomena, such as bilocation, teleportation, telekinesis, and even materialization, which Western mainstream science does not accept, but which nevertheless happen all over the world. Even the latest theory in quantum physics about the possible existence of a parallel universe, or the so-called many worlds theory, as made popular by Spider-Man, is not new to Eastern masters in the esoteric sciences. I believe that quantum physics will eventually pave the way to a convergence between science and spirituality. As the great genius and inventor Nikola Tesla pointed out, the day science studies non-physical things, it will make more progress in 1 decade than all the centuries of its existence. So, can the theory, and I do emphasize the word theory because it's all theoretical. There's evidence, but it is all theoretical. And you're like, it's theoretical, not theoretical. Hey. My show, my shed. Calm down. There is evidence, but it's all theoretical. Can spirituality and paranormal experiences be explained by quantum physics? It's a very interesting topic. Something that I am no expert in, I will tell you. But I will say one of the books that I read last year in 2023 that I enjoyed the most was The Quantum Bigfoot by Ron Moorhead. The same guy that captured the famous Sierra Sounds. That Ron Moorhead wrote a book called The Quantum Bigfoot, in which he applied the theory of quantum physics to the penchant of people to see Bigfoot, and then that creature be gone without a shred of evidence. I think the Tesla quote here is right on point. Typically, science asks how, spirituality asks why. But if science were to start to focus on matters of spirituality, might they discover things that they did not anticipate, that they wrote off as not real or not credible? I think so. I think so. And you know by this point, if you've listened to the show, that I am a spiritual man. I believe that we're all spiritual beings. I believe in things that we cannot explain, that are beyond our understanding as humans. And that's why we have a paranormal segment on this show. What do you think? What do you say, my people? What is your interpretation of quantum physics and its correlation, if not causation, with the paranormal or the spiritual world? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. and let me know. From quantum physics, we go to Congress for our next story. Burchett makes new push for UAP transparency. Representative Tim Burchett from Tennessee has introduced legislation that would force the president to direct federal agencies to make all documents on unidentified anomalous phenomena, I already did the song, aka UAPs or UFOs, available to the public within 279 days. And that's a very specific number. Why 279? Why not 274, 270, 238? I digress. And mandate the president provide a quarterly report on declassification of UAP records to the House. Burchett, the unofficial chair of the bipartisan UAP caucus, said he thinks the legislation is needed because he is not convinced by government denial surrounding UAPs. Whistleblower David Grush came forward last year saying the Pentagon was operating a secret UFO retrieval program. His claims sparked a congressional hearing on the subject and the formation of the caucus. The Department of Defense has denied these allegations, and the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is tasked with investigating UAPs, issued a report saying there was no evidence of extraterrestrial activity connected to UAPs. Arrow did say there was a proposed program called Kona Blue, which would have reverse-engineered UFO technology, but said it never got off the ground because no such technology was ever recovered. Allegedly. I digress. Burchett is one of several legislators who have not been convinced by what they've heard, but he says the issue isn't just about the possibility of alien life. Our federal government's many departments tell us they don't exist, yet they're still being funded with tens of millions of dollars, Burchett said. They issue redacted reports about UFOs, and in our own Pentagon, which has not passed an audit in the history of audits, true as reported by this show, it literally cannot account for over $500 billion. Burchett added that he's heard enough testimony from qualified people, including Navy pilots, to not dismiss the issue. He also claims the government has sidestepped Freedom of Information Act requests by using private contractors when investigating or recovering UAP technology. The proposed bill must first pass committee before it can be brought to the House floor, where it can be voted on by all members. It would also have to pass the Senate, where Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat from New York, has also pushed for UAP transparency and be signed by the president before becoming a law. So, Tim Burchett, a Republican from the state of Tennessee, shout out to our listeners in Tennessee, volunteer country, is one of the good guys, because though he is not necessarily a believer in extraterrestrial life, he certainly is a supporter of declassification, something that has gained in popularity increasingly over the last decade, and now somehow has become a bipartisan issue, a thing that Democrats and Republicans agree upon, because it's popular with the voters, you, the people, and they're now pushing for. Tim Burchett, who has appeared on News Nation many a time and talked about the need to investigate this fully, to hear from the government honestly about what it is that they know and what they have, what information, what technology, what crafts they do or do not have, who believes the testimony of the whistleblower David Grush, which we've covered on this show before. And we have reached out to Tim Burchett here on In the Shed with Wes. We would love to have him in the shed, even by phone call, to talk about these matters. Kudos to you for going after the truth. This is an example of a lawmaker doing their best to hold the government to account, which we are all about on this show. And who knows what we would learn if the government was honest with us about what people are seeing in the skies, about what's going on, about these alleged UFO sightings. I will not say UAP, but UFO sightings, and what they are really. I cannot wait to have Tim Burchett on the show, which we will in 2024, or 2025. And that's a guarantee. From the skies above to Miami, we go for our last story this week. Police swarm Miami Mall after terrified customers claim they saw 8-foot alien shadow creatures. Teenagers brawling at a mall in Miami managed to spark rumors of huge, shadowy aliens being seen. Cops swarmed the area in a bid to get the situation under control, but rumors abounded around X, formerly Twitter, and other social media platforms that the police weren't there to handle the rioting teens, but rather 8 to 10-foot tall shadow aliens. Officials say that officers were there to deal with a group of about 50 teenagers at Bayside Marketplace Mall in the city. The young miscreants are said to have run through the corridors shooting off fireworks, damaging stores, and starting fights. But the conspiracy theorists took off after an aerial video of the incident taken from outside the mall showing dozens of police cars sitting outside the venue with sirens blaring. Some people estimate that there were as many as 60 police cars present. And according to an amateur video posted online, there are moments when a big creature could be seen in plain sight, standing in front of the entrance to the shopping mall, causing many online conspiracists to post their takes on exactly what it was that happened. A TikTok user called Auntie_Coolette went viral, citing multiple witnesses who claimed to have seen creatures who stood 8 to 10 feet tall walking outside and inside the mall. And another user, Sophia.Pippin, in a now deleted video, said he heard gunshots and then saw a big shadow, but that was also solid, disappearing and reappearing while getting closer. And there were plenty of memes to go around too, while one user on X posted, "I don't know if the rumors about the aliens at the Miami Mall are real, but I do know I've never seen this many police in one place." Another user said, "Everybody has cell phones, but nobody has an up-close video of the 8 to 10 foot tall alien by the Miami Mall." According to CBS News Miami, Officer Michael Vega reiterated the circumstances regarding the altercation between 50 juveniles, adding, "There were no aliens, UFOs, or ETs. No airports were closed, no power outages," followed by a facepalm emoji. And the president of Miami's Downtown Neighbors Alliance, James Torres, said the massive police response was because a resident mistook the fireworks as gunshots and reported an active shooter. He said, "Some officers were heavily armed and approached the crowd displaying high-powered rifles, reflecting the fact that officers were initially erroneously told the situation involved an active shooter. While there are no reports of any aliens being in custody, 4 teens were arrested, and by 4:30 a.m. the road was reopened and traffic was flowing smoothly," according to authorities. So, this is one of the most interesting and bizarre and convoluted and most requested stories that we have covered in quite some time. We teased this on multiple episodes, and we got several emails saying, "Hey, when are you going to talk about the Miami Mall monsters?" Today, my babies, my people, my tools, on our lost episode, episode 75, we finally talk about the Miami Mall monsters. This story does not make a lot of sense. I was watching online live time, and the first reports out of Miami were that beings, 9-foot tall beings, were seen in the mall, and that bystanders had drawn weapons and begun firing at these beings. It did not take long for news reports to be corrected, saying that no, there were no 9-foot tall beings, no aliens, no Nephilim, no portals, nothing going on here, nothing to be seen except for some teenagers who brought fireworks and fired them at each other and then wound up, I guess, fighting. I have many questions about how this was handled. There were approximately 60 to 80 police cars with lights on parked outside, and hey, if they got reports that there was an active shooter or multiple active shooters, might they respond in that way? Yes. Absolutely, that is credible. However, there were multiple videos taken. Multiple people who were there live in the flesh at the moment who say something happened that was otherworldly. And I gotta tell you, I have an inside source, my people. I have someone with boots on the ground in Miami that I know personally, that I know very well, that I trust and believe, and I asked him. After this happened, I texted him, I said, hey, what are people saying about this incident in the Miami Mall? He's a resident of Miami, has an ear to the ground, knows what people are saying, and without a moment's pause, he texted back and said, people are saying they saw aliens. People are saying they saw a creature that is not of this world. People are saying they saw beings that were 8 to 10 feet tall in the mall in Miami. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that's what people claim who live in the city, who were there. I don't know. I'm just a guy in the backyard of his home in Alabama in a shed giving you the news. But they say, Miami residents say, it was not just a group of teenagers shooting off fireworks in a mall, which is an interesting explanation and a theory that requires much more detail and explanation than we were given in this instance. It's weird. It's strange. It's odd. Do I know that there were otherworldly creatures in Miami in a mall? No, of course not. I'm not saying that there were. But do I believe that there is nothing to see here? And it's just a misrepresentation of what was going on, that people called the police and said, we think there's gunshots, and they responded in mass. I'm not so sure about that either. What do you think? What really went down in Miami? Do you believe the multiple credible reports that there were beings present in the mall between 8 and 10 feet tall? Have you seen the videos? Do you find them believable? Or do you buy the explanation of police, city, and government officials? I would love to hear from you. You've waited for us to cover this on the show. I would love to hear from you. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. And let me know what you think. Were the Miami Mall monsters real? Were they aliens? Were they interdimensional beings? Or is there nothing to see here? Is there no there? Was it just a misunderstanding? Misunderstanding or cover-up? You be the judge. And let me know. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 75, our lost episode. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Join our membership club at patreon.com/intheshed4. Look for us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to follow us on X at InTheShed4. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at In the Shed with Wes Anderson 6670. And tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines and preview the upcoming college football season together. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scouts. Meemaw, we made it!
We sure did.